Okay, so we just did a lesson on this. We don't have to really review this, but here's a diagram showing you the opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Just a reminder of the acronym we just learned is SOHCAHTOA. And here's a nice little diagram showing you that angle of elevation and angle of depression. So here's basically everything we've just learned. Now, like I said, triangles that are a little bit more complicated. All of the triangles we're going to look at for the next 5 examples are actually 2 triangles, and we're going to try and figure out strategies to solve those. So we're going to get right into it. Question number 1 says, find the length of CD, which is this length right over here. And we have 2 triangles. Now, you may want to make a little, you may want to highlight it and figure out what's happening. I'm going to highlight it here just to show you. We have the small triangle, which looks like this, and it has an angle measurement of 33 degrees. And then we have a larger triangle, which looks like this, and it has an angle measurement of 42 degrees. And both of them share the same horizontal, which is 200 meters. So really what we're going to do is we are going to figure out what the length of BC is, and then we're going to figure out what the length of BD is. And if we subtract those 2 lengths, then we should be able to figure out what the length of just CD is. Okay, so that's, we're still using SOHCAHTOA. We're not using anything fancy, but we're going to have to do it in multiple steps. Sarah? So I'm going to organize my solution, and I'm going to start off by talking about the small triangle. And in the small triangle, I can figure out side length CB. If you want, you can actually call this like the letter X. If you don't want to call it CB, it doesn't matter, or side length CB. So we have 33 degrees, and then according to this 33 degrees, this is opposite, this is adjacent, and this is the hypotenuse. I'm trying to figure out the opposite side length. I have the adjacent side length, so I'm going to be using tan to calculate this little triangle. So it's going to be tan, and I'm not going to write the formula. We kind of practiced doing that. I'm just going to go right into the measurements. It's going to be tan 33 is equal to side length CB divided by the adjacent side length, which is 200. Everyone see where I got all those numbers from? Okay, I'm going to move that up. Go ahead and calculate that. So side length, what'd you guys get? Tan 33 times 200. I'm getting 129.8. Now here's the thing, you know how we round to 1 decimal place? Whenever you're in the middle, and this is sort of a rule for all sorts of mathematical questions, whenever you're in the middle of a calculation, don't round. You want to actually try to keep as many decimals as possible. Every single time you round, your answer becomes less and less precise. So I try to keep as many numbers as possible. All right, so now I know angle CB. We're going to do the same thing for the larger triangle. And then for the big triangle, I have angle 42 degrees here. I'm going to call this side length BD, and I have 200 meters here, and I don't have the hypotenuse, so I'm going to be using tan again to figure this out. So it's going to be tan 42 is equal to the opposite side length is BD divided by 200. So it's basically the exact same calculation. We're going to do tan 42 times 200, which is going to give me 180.080. By the way, these do have measurements. So this is meters and this is meters. Okay, and then for our final answer, in order for us to figure out just that little chunk over there, we know the entire side length is 180, and then we know CB is 129, so we're just going to subtract them. So side length, this is CD, is going to be equal to 180.080 minus 129 0.881. And now we're allowed to round our answer. So we're going to end up getting side length CD to be 50.2 meters. Question number 2 is basically the same concept. You have two triangles and you're trying to figure out triangle side length UV. Usually when there are two triangles given, chances are you're going to have to use some sort of information from the first triangle to help you figure out what you're looking for in the second triangle. So it's lagging a lot, but we have a triangle RST. We have two side lengths and we have 93 degrees. So what we can do is we can actually start off by figuring out this little angle measurement right over here. Because what's that? So the strategy I would use is, okay, what am I trying to find? I'm trying to find UV. I don't have enough information, but if somehow I can determine what this angle is right here, then I can find UV. In order for me to figure out that little angle measurement, I have to start off by figuring out that one right there on the left-hand side of 93 degrees. So let's go ahead and do that. Do we want special names for these? Maybe we can use just X and Y. So I'll call this angle measurement X and I'll call this angle measurement Y. To figure out X, we have the opposite and the hypotenuse. So we're going to be using sine for this. It's going to be sine X is equal to 45.2 divided by 54.8. And remember, to figure out any angle, it's not coming up. To figure out any angle, you're going to have to be using sine inverse. So when you're trying to find an angle, you're going to go sine inverse divided by 54.8. And I get 55.5699. So I'm just going to keep a bunch of these decimal places. It's going to be 55.569 degrees. Now, if I know what X is and I know what 93 degrees is, what is the angle of a horizontal line? Yep. Oh, yes, thank you. Oh, I'm muted there. I think I'm okay here though. But yeah, you're right, I'm muted there. Can you guys hear me at home? Someone just confirm. Yes, okay, perfect. So 180. So what we're gonna do to figure out what the angle measurement for Y is we're gonna say Y is gonna be equal to 180 degrees minus 93 degrees minus 55.569. So 180 minus 90 minus 55.569. And I end up getting 31.431 degrees. I just try to keep extra decimal places and then round at the very, very end. Okay, so now we know what this angle measurement is. We're trying to figure out what this side length is, and we have this. So we can go ahead and use tan to figure this out because we're not dealing with the hypotenuse at all. So we're gonna go tan of angle Y, which is 31.431, is equal to side length UV over 63.1. And side length UV is going to be equal to tan 31.431 times 63.1. And now we're finally allowed to round it to one decimal place. So I'm getting 38.6 meters as my final answer. I'm keeping score. The answer was 38.6. Okay, so Thivia is looking out from her window 25 meters above the ground. So she's on like the third floor or something. The angle of elevation to Alyssa, who is at the top level of a nearby mall, is 37 degrees. And the angle of depression to Afra, who is at the base of the mall, is 23 degrees. Find the height of the mall. So we have to try and figure out what exactly is happening here. I know that there are two buildings next to each other. One of them is shorter and the other one is longer. So let's go ahead and first draw those two buildings. This is going to be my shorter building first. This isn't going to work out. And then this is going to be my longer building. That's not going to work out either. Maybe I need to just move it there and there. That's good. Okay, now we know Thivia is maybe looking up from her window. I'm just going to assume her window is like right over here to make the diagram a little bit easier. And I know from the ground to her window, it's 25 meters. So this measurement right here is going to be 25 meters. I also to Alyssa, who is at the top level of a nearby mall. And by the way, this is my mall. And Alyssa is standing right over here. That angle of elevation is 37 degrees. So remember, the angle of elevation always has to be measured from a horizontal. So according to Thivia, who's in this building, I'm going to draw a horizontal from her line of view. And then she's looking up all the way to Alyssa, who is standing right there. And that angle measurement is going to be 37 degrees. So I'm going to put that right in there. Then the next part of the question says the angle of depression. So now she's looking down to Afra, who is at the Okay, so again, Thivia is standing 25 meters above, and then she's looking up at 37 degrees at Alyssa. She's looking down 23 degrees at Afra, and we're trying to figure out how high that mall actually is. So how are we going to do this? Well, we have two triangles. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to try and figure out this length over here. And I can do that because if this is 25 meters, that means this is 25 meters as well. So let's put in some additional pieces of information. This is going to be 25 right over here. And I'm going to call this side length X. All right, so that means in order for me to find X, it's going to be opposite and adjacent. So I'm going to say tan 23 degrees is equal to 25 over X. And then to solve this, I'm just going to switch those around. So it's going to be 25 over tan 23. We're going to calculate that. 25 divided by tan 23 is going to give us 58.896 meters. Oh, yeah, meters. Okay, so how does that help us? Well, now that we know what this measurement is and we know what this angle is, we can figure out what this is. And in order to find the height of the mall, it'll just be 25 plus that little chunk at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to call this side length Y. And we're basically trying to solve for Y. So what's that going to be? Again, it's going to be tan. It's going to be tan 37 is equal to Y over X, but we know what X is. It's 58.896. And then to solve for Y, it's just going to be multiplying those two numbers together. I didn't even press clear on my calculator, so all I have to do is press tan 37, and that's going to give 4.381 meters. Okay, so now in order for us to figure out the height of the mall, it's just going to be 25 plus whatever we just solved for the y value. So I'm just going to say height of mall. And that's just going to be 25 plus 44.381, which is just going to give us 69 I guess we can round it to one decimal place. It's going to be 69.4 meters. All right, so it says Zidane and Shen are standing on opposite sides of a tree. The tree is vertical. I have Z, Zidane on the left, and Shen, S on the right. The angle of elevation to the top of the tree from Zidane is 30 degrees. So this right here is 30 degrees. And then from Shen, it's 35 degrees. Angle of elevation is always really easy because the horizontal is usually drawn for you, and it's pretty straightforward. If they are 65 meters apart, so these guys are 65 meters apart like this, how tall is the tree? And I'm just going to call H to be the height of the tree. Now to do this question, I'm going to show you a method, okay? So we don't have enough information to just use sine, cosine, tan right away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call this side X and I'm going to call this side Y. So basically the distance from Zidane to the tree is X and the distance from Shen to the tree is Y. And then I have another variable H. So for questions where you have 3 different unknowns, what you have to do is we're going to actually have to do a little bit of factoring. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at one triangle and determine some sort of ratio for it. So if I look at the Zidane triangle, I'm going to write tan of 30 is equal to opposite over adjacent. So I'm looking at the left triangle. I'm going tan of 30 is equal to H over X. And then I'm going to rearrange this and solve for X. So it's going to be X is equal to H over tan 30. And by the way, like anything in math, there are probably 4 or 5 different ways to do this. I'm just showing you one, and then later you guys can just try another method and see what works best for you. Okay, so that is my expression for this side of the triangle. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side of the triangle. So I'm going to be doing it on this side. And it's basically the same calculation. It's going to be tan of 35 is equal to opposite over adjacent. So H over Y. And I'm going to rearrange it and solve for Y. So Y is going to be equal to H over tan 35. And the reason why I like to do it this way, where I have like an expression for X and an expression for Y, is because I can put both of them together and make another expression. So take a look at these numbers over here. We know X is one distance, Y is one distance, and the entire distance is 65. So can you put all those together and make another expression? It would be perfect. So X plus Y is equal to 65. Okay, now basically here's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be taking this X and putting it right into here. You're going to be taking this Y and putting it right into there. We're basically using substitution to try and solve this question. And the reason why we have to do that is because we have 3 unknowns. There's not enough information to do anything that we did in the past. We can't like try and figure out an angle or a side length. We don't know what it is. You also can't assume that they're exactly halfway in between. Like you can't split up the 65 and make it that way. So this is the only way to solve it. Our X is H over tan 30. And our Y is H over tan 35 is equal to 65. Now, again, there are multiple different ways to solve this, but I find the easiest way is, see how I have an h in both the expressions? I'm going to factor out the h. And when I do that, I'm going to be left with 1 over tan 30 plus 1 over tan 35 is equal to 65. And I've taught this many different ways. Like I've taught it trying to add them together and move it around. I just find this is the easiest method for students to grasp. If you have the same term, if you have the same variable in both terms, just factor it out and replace it with a 1. So you factor out the h, you're left with 1 over tan 30. And then in the other expression, you're left with 1 over tan 35. Okay, now honestly, the hardest part about this is going to be to do the calculation. So on your calculator, what you're going to do is you're going to go bracket 1 divided by tan 30, close bracket, plus bracket 1 divided by tan 35, close bracket, and then equal sign. So I'll repeat that again. Bracket 1 divided by tan 30, close bracket, plus bracket 1 divided by tan 35, close bracket. What do you guys get when you do that? Perfect, yeah. And so what happens is you get 3.16h is equal to 65. And now we can very easily calculate for h by just going 65 divided by 3.16. So you're basically just moving the 3.16 to the other side to give you a final answer of 20.6 meters. So that h is the height of the tree. It's 20.6 meters. Yes, absolutely. You could have done all of the calculations in one step. Yes. Okay, so just to go over it again, whenever you have a question with 3 variables, you find an expression for one side of the triangle with x and h in it. You find an expression for the other side of the triangle with h and y in it. You can also rearrange it for h. So you could have rearranged it for h and let them equal to one another. That's a possibility. I rearranged it for x and y, and then I put it together into this formula right here. X plus y is equal to 65, et cetera, et cetera. So the other way that I'm saying is you could have done, for this one, you could have done h is equal to x tan 30. And then for this one, you could have done h is equal to, actually, that would not have worked. You would still have too many unknowns. So scrap that. Marzu, question? I usually keep 3 decimal places. And then at the end, I round it to 1. Yeah. I guess I didn't write it down, but in my calculation, I did keep 3. Okay. Last question. Jessica and Ish are on the same side of a cliff. So let's say we have like Bluffers Park right here, the big cliff. So we have a cliff right over here. Let me get my chunky pen back. Okay, there we go. So we have a cliff here, and here's the ground. And this right here is the cliff. And 2 people, Jessica and Ish, are both standing on the same side of the cliff. Sightseeing along the same line, Jessica views the top of the cliff at an angle of 21 degrees, and Ish, who's in front of Jessica, views the top of an angle at 29 degrees. So this tells us that they're not standing right beside each other. One person, Jessica, is behind the other person, Ish, who's in front of her. Now, you can also figure that out by looking at the angle of measurement. If you're looking up at something, the person that's closer is actually looking up higher, and the person that's further behind is actually looking at less of an angle of elevation. So if I didn't tell you who was in front and who was behind, just look at the numbers. 21 degrees means that person is behind. 29 degrees means that person is going to be ahead. Did I switch those around? No, I think I might have said it incorrectly. Yeah, so I think I said it incorrectly, but this is what I meant. So this is the top of the cliff. This Ish's angle of elevation is going to be 29 degrees. And Jessica's angle of elevation is going to be 21 degrees. And the point I was trying to make is, the reason why this makes sense is the person in the front has a higher angle of elevation, and the person behind has a lower angle of elevation. If Jessica is 30 meters from Ish, so that means, yeah. Tell me why. if Jessica is 30 meters from Ish, so that means they are 30 meters apart, how tall is the cliff? So we're trying to figure out what the H value is here. So actually, now that we've done question 4, this question becomes a little bit easier because what we're going to do is we're going to introduce 2 variables. So we're going to call one of them X, and that is basically the distance from Ish and the cliff. And then we're going to call the other one Y, which is the distance of Jessica from the cliff. So X is Ish to the cliff, and Y is Jessica to the cliff. All right, we're using the exact same idea that we used up here to solve this question. We're going to begin by first figuring out 2 different expressions, one for one triangle, the other for the other. So let's look at this triangle here first. We have 29, this is opposite, this is adjacent. So I'm going to put all that information together and write tan 29 is equal to opposite, which is H, over adjacent, which is X. And I like to rearrange mine for X and Y, so I'm going to say X is equal to H over tan 29. The other expression will be for the big triangle. So if you take a look at this big triangle here, our degree is 29, we have H, and then we have a Y. So that's going to be tan 21 is equal to opposite, which is H, over adjacent, which is Y. And I'm going to rearrange that for Y. So it's going to be Y is equal to H over tan 21. So if you look at it, actually the setup is exactly the same as the previous question. All right. Given all of this and all of these numbers below, can we figure out an expression with X, Y, and the number 30? This time it's not going to be X plus Y is 30. Rania, what do you think? Kind of, Suruka? That's a little better. So Y minus X, I think you were thinking that and you just weren't saying it right. So you're taking the whole Y, you're subtracting the X, and that's going to give you the remaining piece, which is 30. Okay. So same steps as before. Let's plug in our Y, which is H over tan 21 minus our X is H over tan 29 is equal to 30. The last time I solved this, I factored out the H. So I'm going to do the same thing here. It's going to be H, and I'm going to be left with 1 over tan 21 minus 1 over tan 29 is equal to 30. We're going to get our calculator. We're going to go bracket 1 divided by tan 21 close bracket minus bracket 1 divided by tan 29 close bracket. And let me know what you guys get. So I got 0.801. Did you guys get that as well? Yep, and then you're just gonna go 30 divided by that number to give us a final answer of the cliff being 37.5 meters tall. I'm just gonna move that over here. Okay, that was a lot. Let me tell you what your homework is, and then you guys can relax for a little bit. So these types of questions can be found on handout A, and I'm asking you to do numbers 3, 4, 8 to 10. So for those of you at home, I'll just show you handout A, and I'll tell you what numbers to do. So it's this page right here. You can take a screenshot of it. And I would like you to do question 3, which is this one here. 4, which is this one here, and then 8, 9, and 10. So basically the right-hand side of the sheet.